Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Show. My name is Chris Greco. After a long hiatus, very long hiatus, and I apologize for that. A lot of things happening, grandkids and different aspects of what's going on in the world. I finally have gotten the ability to sit down and do this. And this has been, again, it's been a long time, and I've tried to figure out how do I make the Data Show so that it's not for just geeks, right? It's not for data geeks. It doesn't just sit there and espouse different types of data aspects and everything else. So I thought the best thing to do is to approach something from a current event, a current situation that's happening, that everybody all of a sudden has become this data, this data person, this person who's interested in data. And I think it's pretty important to understand what data is and what it does and all those types of things. But I think the bottom line is that right now the Bureau of Labor Statistics is like in the #1 slot, because the modern media, the mass media, has thrown that into a place of absolute visibility. And it's funny because Bureau of Labor Statistics is in that name, and they're getting a lot of hits on the situation. And I'm going to tell you right now that what we're going to do is we're going to take an objective view of this. We're going to take a look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We're going to take a look at their data. We're going to take a look at different aspects. And at the end, you make a decision. You decide whether or not you're going to trust this data. I'm not going to sit there as a person who is a statistics supposed expert and data analytics. I've taught data analytics. I've taught statistics. I've taught these different areas. I have a graduate certificate in it from Penn State. I do different things that have to do with data. I just love data. I love dealing with it. I love doing it. But in addition to that, I also have a very skeptical look at data, especially when it comes to medical studies having to do with sampling. That sampling is really, really difficult. And we'll go into that a little bit today as we go into the data aspects. So today, what we're going to do is we are going to call our data show title Decision-Driven Data Making. It's supposed to be decision-making, data-driven decision-making, right? Data-driven decision-making. But in many, many ways, it's decision-driven data making, because what happens is that the data is made to support the decision. And that's not the way data is supposed to be. Data is supposed to be very, very, very objective. So we'll go into those things as time goes on. But the first thing I want to do is go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we're going to go right to it. BLS.gov. Anytime you see a .gov area, I trust that. I trust the .gov as not being a scam. Or if you put BLS.com, I'm sure there's probably a BLS.com somewhere. Be careful, because that is not a government website. GOV is approved by the domain, by the ICANN people. It is verifiable. It is valid. All the things that have to do with that. So we're going to go here and we're going to see what Bureau of Labor Statistics is all about. And what I did was I went to the menu. Now, this is the main site. So when we go here, this is the site. It says an official website of the United States government. And here's how you know, and it'll tell you how you know. Basically, it means it's official. Site is secure, HTTPS. It's good. So there you have it. Now, let's go to the menu, and I hit menu. If you go to U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you may not see the screen, but hit menu and you'll see it. And you'll see all these different things, economic releases. This is where we're going to go to today, basically data tools. And I like this because it has a lot of different things in here. And what I really like is that they have, text files, industry at a glance, industry productivity viewer, injury and illness calculator, charts for economic news releases, and all these popular series reports, top picks, one screen, multi-screen maps, data finder, right? So if you go into data finder, it has all the different subjects, data finder, economic releases, all these different things that go along with that. And they have data tools. So here are the data tools here. And inflation, prices, employment, unemployment, employment projections, paying benefits. So it's got a lot of different things that you can take a look at. And I mean, it has all kind of different database names, average price data, industry data, employment, the hours, all these different areas that you can go to, and you can see the different aspects: unemployment rates, levels, labor force statistics, employment projections. What I liked about this is you put like engineer in some of these areas, and you can see what the engineering is going to be for the next whatever 20 years. So that's kind of like that's neat when it goes into that area. So NAICS is a code that you put in for different things like data analytics or statistics or education, training, those types of things. It's a national code that goes in there, identification code. So the thing I wanted to go to, and that I may have to put in the search area, was an explanation as to what each of these things do. And I think this is pretty important, so I'm going to make sure and see if I can. I may have to pause this just for a second. Let me take a look at. Okay, so what we're going to do is I put in the search. I looked through the page here for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'm trying to find this thing. So finally, I just thought, you know, something. I'm just going to put in what I think, and that is data definitions. Now, let's make sure we put that down here. Data definitions. I think this is the number one area where we talk about, and we sit back and we say, you know, we need to figure out exactly what we're talking about. We talk about data definitions. And this is something that people just don't understand. And they sit back and they go, oh my gosh, the unemployment rate is way up. Oh, look at the unemployment. Look at the employment. I think you need to go to data definitions. What is unemployment? What is employment? How do they come up with that figure? How do they do that? So I think that when we talk about data definitions, I put that in here. And you notice there's a lot of different things here. Data definitions, employment projection, data definitions. So concept and definitions, Euros, CPS for the current population survey. So let's start there. Let's say concept and definitions, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So let's go to that. And you have concept and definitions. This page describes the key concepts and definitions for current population survey or household survey. So this is a survey where data is gathered and then reported. But you have to understand what the definition is. If you don't know what the definition is that goes along with that data, then basically it's all about semantics. I hate to put them. I hate to paint them all with a broad brush. But politicians do this stuff all the time. They talk about different things and then they don't define them. Like they say cut in Medicare. Oh, there's going to be a cut in Medicare. There's going to be a cut in Social Security. There's going to be a cut in this. It's like, is there going to be a cut? What's the definition of a cut? If the definition of a cut is not increasing at the same percentage as in prior years, then that is the definition of a cut and should be used with what all definition of when you talk about a cut. That's what it should be. But that's not exactly what happens. All right, so it's that type of thing that the problem exists. So let's talk about this. Labor force, employment, related concepts, civilian non-institutional population. What is that? So it says, so civilian non-institutional population, age 16 and older is the PACE population group or universe used for the current population statistics published by BLS. Okay, so let's take a look at this for a second. 16 and older. 16 and older, not 18 and older, not 20 and older, 16. Why 16? Because there's something about 16 that's magical. There's something about 16 where you can work without having to have like a work permit, or maybe you have to have a work permit, or maybe there's something there that the age of 16, anything below 16 is considered to be child labor, which is against the law. So you can't hire somebody below the age of 16 because at that point, then there would be an issue. So what does it exclude? Excludes active duty members of the U.S. Armed Forces. Okay. People confined to or living in institutions or facilities such as prisons, jails, or other correctional institutions, residential care facilities, included in civilian non-institutional population are citizens of foreign countries who reside in the United States but do not live on the premises or of an embassy. Citizens of foreign countries who reside in the United States but do not live on the premises of an embassy. So let's take a look at that. Citizens of foreign countries, they do not live on the embassies. So that is included with that. So that's a definition of that. Civilian labor force or labor force. The labor force includes all people 16 and older who are classified as either employed or unemployed as defined below. Well, let's find out what employed means. Employed. If during the survey reference week, now they do this every week, right? I mean, this is not something that's done monthly, yearly, whatever else. And the numbers that have to do with this, from what I saw, and I'll try to share that with you if I can find it, is the population is tens of thousands of people. So it's not like 1,000 people, like in these surveys that they go out there and they do polling, they do 1,000 people, 1,000 registered voters. I'm sorry, folks, that's just not enough. That's not enough to gauge a real polling effort. I don't care if it's for or against you. It's hard to do that. You might as well just go ahead and take the ones that they have from the the news, the local news, where they go out and they survey people because people sign on to their news site. I mean, that's you're talking about a very, very low sampling. Bureau of Labor Statistics has good they have good sampling numbers. And when you talk tens of thousands of people, that's good sampling. Okay, so unemployed. Now look at this. If they meet any of the following criteria, it means ORs, right? They worked at least 1 hour as a paid employee, right? Or they worked at least 1 hour in their own business, professional trade, or farm, or were temporarily absent from their job, business, whether or not they were paid for the time off, were temporarily absent from their job, business or farm. Okay, now this is classified as employed. Temporarily absent from their job, business or farm, whether or not they were paid for that time off, or worked without pay for a minimum of 15 hours in a business or farm owned by, I mean, you can go down here, all the way down, right? And these are even defined. So, not considered employed, volunteer work, unpaid internships, unpaid training programs, it goes on, in National Guard, jury duty, work around one's home, such as cleaning, painting, repairing, or whatever else. So, I mean, let me tell you something from a data analytic perspective. These are very, 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 very good definitions. These are very specific, detailed data definitions. If decisions are made based on these types of, and now the hard part is, it's not making these data definitions. It's applying them to make sure that every single person applies to this area. That's the tough part, because when you're talking about a survey, you're talking about, in many, many cases, self-reporting. Let's put this down. Self-reporting. I think this is important concept, is called self-reporting. What this means is the people that are doing surveys report themselves. So they state that they haven't worked in, or they've worked at least an hour. They say that it's their subjective view of what goes into this survey. They'll read the definition and then they'll apply it to themselves. That's a tough one. And that's where surveys really have, I look at every single survey as with a grain of salt, because you never can tell. How the questions are asked, how they're phrased. There's a lot of work that goes into a survey, folks. But this is something that is very, very important from that standpoint. Employment population ratio, unemployed. They were not employed during the survey. They were available for work during the survey reference week, except for temporary illness. They made at least one specific one, right? They have to meet all of the following. Now look at this. Look at this. Look. Any of the following. Those are ors, or, right? But in the unemployment area, you have to meet all of the following, which means you have to have ands, right? There's a difference between ors and ands, and even in the standpoint of probability, there's a difference between ors and ands, right? Because ors you plus, ands you multiply. So there's addition multiplication aspect there. They were not employed during the survey. They were available for work during the survey, and they were available for work during the survey for the reference week. And they made at least one specific active effort to find a job during the 4-week period, ending with the survey reference week. Or they were temporarily laid off and expecting to be recalled for their job. So all these things, active job search methods. Here we go. Active job search method defined. So, I mean, look at this unemployment rate. The unemployment rate represents the number of unemployed people as a percentage of the labor force, which is defined the sum of the unemployed and employed and unemployed. Percentage of people from the total aspect. That's pretty straightforward, folks. That's really, really straightforward from that standpoint. When you're talking about the ability to take a percentage from this group and this group, you put them together, you add them, and then you take a percentage of the people that are from that area, the unemployment area, then I think that's the unemployment rate is calculated as unemployed divided by labor force times 100. I mean, it really makes sense. They do it with return on investment. They do it with cost benefit analysis. A lot of these things are totaled and then they're divided. So it's a situation where you have to make that happen. And I think that's pretty cool. So labor force, not in the labor force. Those people that are excluded from labor force, not employed during the survey reference week. So what is a reference week? Let's take a look at that. The current population week is a specific week of the month used to determine the employment status of survey respondents and the last week of the 4-week job search period used to determine unemployment status. So you can dive down into this stuff. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to me, and this is me personally, it's my opinion and my opinion only, do a lot of work from the standpoint of being able to make the situation happen, to be able to put out good statistics, in spite of the many limitations that have to go along with trying to do data. It's really, really difficult. And it's something that you just need to take a look at. And you need to take a look at from a very, an in-depth perspective, especially with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this is all here. I mean, you could take a look at whatever you want in these areas, what a quartile is, deciles, all these different things. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of these areas. Look at this, Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. It defines this. It defines what Hispanic or Latino ethnicity is. I mean, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Salvadorian, other Central American, South American, Dominican, some other Spanish, Hispanic, or Latino group. So, I mean, revisions of 2003. These changes pertain to Hispanic or Latino ethnicity in 2003. So they actually made the change to try to keep up with the current situation, the current population of the United States. So, I mean, people can bust on the Bureau of Labor Statistics all they want. They can sit there and they say, oh, there's an issue here, there's whatever. But the explanation, they are more than happy to explain exactly where their data comes from, exactly what happens with the data, exactly what the situation is with the data. And yes, I know I didn't show any charts, any graphs, or anything like that today, but I wanted to make sure that you understand that this is, I mean, they even define age. They define age. In the current population survey, age refers to the age at last birthday, not age at nearest birthday. Unless otherwise specified, CPS estimates include people age 16 or older. There's no upper age limit. So, I mean, it defines everything. Educational attainment. I mean, it has all these things. I mean, yes, I understand where, data can be revised down, data can do this, data can do that. But, to me, it's, as a statistician, as a data analyst, and I've done it in many different realms. I've done, the first time I ever did anything was correlate revenue to cost of advertising. And that was back in 1974. And I did that on paper with pencil with a bunch of computer runs in front of me. So, I mean, I did that. I didn't even know what I was doing from that standpoint. I figured it out, X and Y coordinates and all the other things go along with that. I wanted to prove it showed that the more we spent on advertising, the more we sold. Well, that was probably something that was going to happen anyways. But I mean, so this is fantastic, and you can get this from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and data definitions. Discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are a subset, marginally attached labor force, and also part of a broader group of people not in the labor force. See the diagram above. They're not classified as unemployed because they have not actively searched for work in the last 4 weeks. Yeah, I know politicians do that. Well, the unemployment thing, it doesn't include discouraged workers, or it does include discouraged workers. Well, it doesn't, because it just says it. It says, I'm not classified as unemployed. They're not classified as unemployed, folks. So, I mean, when asked, what is the main reason you were not looking for work in the past 4 weeks? These individuals indicate some type of discouragement about their job prospects. There are no jobs available. They've not been able to find work in the past. They lack the education. Employers think that they're too young, too old, that they're subject. I just watched Younger on Netflix. Not that I'm endorsing that. But anyways, it's you don't lie, okay? You don't lie about your age to an employer ever. Just a side note. Don't do that. Don't do that. So this is. I mean, it even has. Oh my gosh! It even had people not in labor force. People do not want a job. People want a job now. Look at it. I mean, you can go all the way across here, folks. You can figure out exactly marginally attached to labor force. I mean, they have a flow chart. They have a flow chart to talk about this. Not in the labor force. I mean, look at this. Not in the labor force. It has a freaking flow chart. So take a look at this, will you please? Put the search in there, put that definition in the search, and take a look at this. I mean, look at this. It's amazing. All these are concepts and definitions that are used by the current population survey. So please take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and cut this short. So what did we talk about today? What's the most important thing? First of all, decision-driven data making is done whenever you do not have good data definitions. Data definitions take into consideration each of those columns that are on the data, and each of them are defined. If you can't define a column in your data, don't report the data. If you can't define the data, how can you possibly report it? You're doing an injustice to the data analysts that are out there doing a good job. You're doing an injustice to the individuals that read the report or the study. So make sure that you define the data. And I see a lot of medical studies that do not define data. They throw it out there. They throw out different definitions, but it's not really defined. So that is a definite issue. But this Bureau of Labor Statistics, great stuff. I mean, it is, if the data has got a problem with the reporting, it certainly does not come into a situation where you are, you don't have the ability. Let me put it this way. If you have poor data definitions, you're going to have poor data reporting. If you have good data definitions, then you're going to have good data reporting. That's really, honest to God, you can take and split that out and do what you need to do with that. I know this is all about data reporting. It wasn't about, all the fancy dancy charts and graphs and look at this data chart and look at these things. And these, I don't have all that. This is about what goes into those reports. And I think that's important to be able to understand and be able to pass on. Yeah, I lecture. Sorry. Teaching is a teaching moment. So until next time, I'm going to tell you, always look at these data definitions. If you can't find them, that's a hint. If you can't find data definitions, that's really a big hint when it comes to data reporting. You have to take a look at that report with a little skeptical eye here, folks, because if they don't define the data, if they don't define the different data points and data categories, then you're in for a really hard read from that standpoint. So until next time, it's Chris Greco saying, thanks for watching. And remember, data is part of our lives, but don't make it decision-driven data making. Make it data-driven decision making. Take care.